About 10 years ago, I used to deliver pizzas for a small independent pizza place near Beacon Hill in Boston. If you live anywhere near Charles Street, you might know which one I'm talking about. It was a pretty good job. The place was almost always busy, and the boss was an awesome guy, so we ended up getting paid a living wage on top of the tips we made. One evening shift, things got really weird. Although my job title was delivery driver, during quiet periods, the other drivers and I justified our somewhat inflated wages by helping out around the shop. We helped with cleaning, aided the kitchen staff in prepping ingredients, and occasionally answered the phone to take delivery orders. On one particular shift, the phone started ringing while I was cleaning one of the pizza ovens. No one rushed to answer, so I wiped my hands and picked up the call. The person on the other end was barely understandable, an old man with a raspy, gravelly voice that sounded like he'd undergone some kind of throat operation. I tried my best to make out what he was saying, turning up the volume on the handset and blocking my free ear, but I couldn't understand a thing. Apologizing, I told him I'd pass him along to the manager. When I handed the phone to my manager, I stuck around to see if it was just me who couldn't understand the elderly man. My boss greeted him, but soon wore a confused expression as the guy started talking. He tried to remain polite, but soon lost patience and took the call into his office, making a remark about the guy needing meals on wheels, not pizza. With a grin, he headed to his office while I resumed cleaning. About 15 minutes later, my boss emerged from his office, still on the phone. His conversation suggested it was an important order. I figured it was a different call, as taking an order doesn't usually take 15 minutes. Curious, I asked my boss about the old guy. He didn't answer, just put on his jacket and told me to watch the business while he headed downtown. When I asked where he was going, he simply said, "Chinatown, won't be long." There was only one reason my boss would drive to Chinatown so late: ingredients. Some late-night grocery stores there sell cheap, quality produce. But I knew we weren't short on anything. We'd prepped all the toppings ourselves. When he returned, he had one of those airtight coolers we used for fresh seafood. He then asked us to make a basic cheese pizza and bring it to his office when done. No questions asked. When I delivered the pizza to his office, a disgusting smell hit me. It was the most gag-inducing stench I'd ever encountered. Before I could ask, he grabbed the pizza box and shut the door in my face. The smell was so bad it permeated the entire back of the house, with the chefs yelling about who'd crapped their pants. It reminded me of raw sewage or a backed-up septic tank. I wanted to know what it was, but had no intention of going near the boss's office again. Later, my boss emerged from his office, the smell wafting out again. With a pained look, he asked which of the two drivers on duty, myself included, wanted to make a delivery. It was clear the stench was coming from the pizza. The other driver refused, knowing it would take days to get the smell out of his car. Panicking, my boss promised me a huge bonus if I delivered it. Reluctantly, I demanded to know exactly what was on the pizza. He took me out back and explained it was durian. Durian, a fruit from Southeast Asia, has a notorious smell. My boss had to visit Chinatown to get one. He explained that some people find it sweet and fragrant, but I wasn't one of them. Needing the money, I agreed to deliver it. I packed the pizza and drove to the address. An elderly man with oxygen tubes answered. He was the same guy from the phone call. He smiled, salivating when he smelled the pizza, and handed me an envelope full of cash. I thanked him and left, trying not to gag. Back at the pizzeria, I handed the envelope to my boss. He gave me $300, my cut of the tip. It felt good, but I told my boss I wouldn't deliver that kind of pizza again. The smell clung to my scooter, and almost everyone I passed complained. My boss understood and promised no more trips to Chinatown for durian. 3 months later, the same old man called again. This time, I immediately handed the phone to my boss, who handled it with a resigned look. My stomach dropped, knowing what was coming. My boss promised a $600 tip if I made the delivery. Unable to refuse, I decorated my scooter with air fresheners and prepared the pizza. When I peeked inside the pizza box before delivering, I saw something that was definitely not durian. It was some kind of meat, brown and blackened around the edges, clearly decaying. I shut the box and tried not to think about it, delivering it to the old man, who drooled at the smell. The envelope was even thicker this time. Back at the pizzeria, I demanded answers. My boss, reeking of booze, refused to explain. He just handed me my $600 and accepted my resignation. Back when I was in community college, I worked at this pizza place that was basically in the middle of nowhere. It was located in a strip mall at the side of a highway in a pretty rural area. There were just a few houses dotted around the surrounding area, so the store never quite went out of business. But since we hardly made any money, we operated with a skeleton crew at all hours, especially late at night. Sometimes it would just be 2 people in the store, me and one other guy. One of us would make the pies and the other would drive them out to the customers. It wasn't always a perfect system, but we managed. Without a doubt, the best time to work was Wednesday or Thursday nights, simply because of how quiet it was. If you worked a Wednesday or Thursday late shift, you basically got paid to sit around on your butt and talk trash with your coworker. You'd maybe get 1 or 2 calls, nothing stressful, and that was that. But one night, we got a call almost bang on 11 p.m., a half hour before closing. Any other time, we might actually be kind of angry, but it was just way too out of the ordinary for us to even be mad. I think it was legit the first time we'd ever gotten a call that late. At the time, my coworker was out in his car having a quick smoke before we started our clean down, so I was all on my own when I heard the phone. Part of me was like, just don't answer it, dude. But honestly, curiosity got the best of me. Most of the families in the county worked their farms, so they went to bed pretty early in the evening. Who was calling so late? When I picked up, I didn't recognize the voice on the other end. Given the nature of the job, I pretty much knew everyone who called along with exactly what they were going to order. But still, it wasn't entirely unusual that we got someone new calling. What was really unusual was how this guy's order differed from most others, not to mention how he was acting in general. Right off the bat, I could tell there was something not quite right with the guy. His voice was super raspy, like he lived in a whiskey still and smoked Marlboros for breakfast. I knew it was about to be a weird call when the first thing he asked for was a hamburger. I told him, "Sir, this is a pizza place. I can read you our menu if you like." We only had like 6 different pizzas with a couple of sides. The guy said it was fine, and all he wanted was hamburger meat. I assumed he meant on a pizza since we did a cheeseburger pizza at the time. So I asked for some clarification. But no, this guy didn't want a pizza. He just wanted hamburger meat. Raw hamburger meat. I'm pretty sure that's what steak tartare is. But I figured there had to be some kind of food hygiene law against it. I asked my coworker, who was way too blazed to give me a solid answer. So I gave the guy an honest answer and told him I wasn't even sure if I was allowed to sell him raw hamburger meat. The guy started begging and pleading so hard that I was actually speechless for a moment. He sounded like he was fiending for it so bad that it was actually kind of creepy. I was even less sure about the whole thing by that point, but after the guy on the phone offered a handsome tip, I made an executive decision and decided to go ahead with the sale. People do dumb stuff for money, right? Well, I suppose this was my thing. I threw what I considered to be $10 worth of hamburger meat into a plastic carton, plugged this guy's address into my navigation system, and began the drive out to his house. I'd been making deliveries in that area of Lawrence County for about 18 months at that time. I'm not saying I knew the place like the back of my hand, but I'd certainly never seen this guy's house before. I didn't even know that old place was there. It was an old farmhouse at the end of a long dirt road, and it looked like it was falling apart. It would have made a great haunted house, and all I could think as my headlights suddenly lit the whole place up was that it was like the start of a horror movie or something. I was the poor dumb pizza boy doomed to die in the film's intro, introducing whatever crazed killer or monstrous creature that was the movie's main feature. I parked up, walked up the old rickety porch, and since there was no sign of a doorbell, I just knocked on this guy's door. When he answered, he actually looked pretty normal. I expected some decrepit old witch to answer the door to a house like that, not a guy in a sweater vest who looked like the dad of all dads. As I handed over the bag of hamburger meat, I couldn't resist asking him why he'd ordered raw hamburger and not an actual menu item. I figured he was going to grill it at home or whatever, so I framed my question as such. But the guy just smiled, shook his head, and told me he was going to eat it raw. I must have completely failed to hide the look of disgusted confusion on my face because the guy then launched into this big speech about the benefits of eating raw meat. He talked a lot of science terms that I didn't understand, but he seemed to know what he was talking about. And it actually weirdly put me at ease for a second. As he fished around in his wallet for a tip, he handed me 11 crumpled ones. As I counted them, I thanked him, appreciating his generosity. But then, I looked up just in time to see the guy crack the lid on the plastic container of meat, bring it up to his nose, and take a long, deep sniff of what was inside. The way he acted wasn't like this wholesome, smells yummy kind of happy. It seemed straight up perverse. I just watched, trying not to freak out, as the smell of the meat seemed to legit turn him on. After he huffed it, he shuddered, eyes rolling in their sockets before he got this glazed look in them. All I could think was, this is my cue to leave. I awkwardly thanked the guy, just happy to get off his property. But right as I turned to walk back off the porch, I saw something moving in the dimly lit hallway over the dude's shoulder. Poking out at about waist height from behind a door frame was this big pair of terrified eyes looking back at me from sunken sockets. It was a kid. I don't even know what compelled me to ask. But whatever it was so strong that it overrode any desire I had to flee while I still had the legs to carry me. I remember saying something like, "That's your kid, huh?" instead of giving me this big smile or waxing lyrical about what a proud dad he was, something that would have suited his whole sweater vest dad look. He suddenly looked furious. He spun around on the spot. The kid looked terrified and disappeared from view. When he turned back, he just stared at me with this deep, moody glare that sent a shiver down my spine. Once again, I got that overwhelming, "this is my cue to leave" feeling. I thanked the guy, backing off the porch in a way where I never quite turned my back on him. He didn't say a word in response, just kept that angry look on his face like I'd done something to offend him or seen something I shouldn't have. It took 20 minutes to drive back to the pizza place. 20 long minutes where I replayed the interaction in my head, over and over again. I called 911 as soon as I got back. I had no idea what was going on back there, but it couldn't have been good. No kid should be that scared of their dad, if that guy even was that kid's dad at all. My logic was that I could call 911, find out I just came out at a bad time and took the dude's actions out of context, and maybe feel a little embarrassed. Or I could find out that something horrible was happening in that house, feel horrendous guilt that I failed to stop it, and then be haunted for the rest of my life. What I wasn't expecting was that there was actually a third option, one that turned out to be worse than the first two. So I called the cops. They went to check it out, and then the deputy got back in touch to reassure me that he'd been over to the guy's house. Had a good look around and found that there was nothing wrong. I figured that once a cop told me that, I'd feel fine. Kind of stupid for assuming stuff, but generally fine. But I didn't. I found myself just not believing the guy. He couldn't have seen the same stuff that I had and just walked away being like, yeah, it's all good in that house. I didn't do another delivery to that house for the rest of the time I worked there. And I certainly wasn't complaining about not having to make any more weird deliveries. But even today, I find myself wondering what the deal was with that guy and his kid, and whether or not I should have done more to investigate. Thank you for watching. If you found these stories gripping, don't forget to subscribe for more spine-tingling content. For another hair-raising tale, check out our suggested video. And if you're hungry for more eerie encounters, dive into our playlist featuring similar chilling narratives.